Good and gracious God, we come to you this morning, expecting to hear a word from you. I ask that you use me in spite of myself and all of my imperfections to preach this good news, of which I am an ambassador in chains. God, help me to preach not for the acceptance or the validation of many, but to the glory of one. Speak, Lord, speak. Your servants are listening. Amen. You may be seated. Well, good morning. In my big mama voice, good morning. We made it to Sunday. Thanks be to God. And also thanks to the very Reverend Jared Weber Johnson for sharing his pulpit with me not once but twice today. And also coming in, it is my joy and my honor to be here for the culminating service in the series about the divine feminine. I don't know if you know, but you've got a powerhouse trio that has worked very hard on this series. Many thanks to Kathy and to Lynn for this wonderful, their hospitality, even this corsage that made me feel like the beloved child that God says that I am. And for their work in rallying and herding all the cats that brought me here today. And also the great thanks to the trio in that planning committee, the Reverend Doctor, Dr. Craig Lemming. That's never going to get old. I want you to know that. That is never going to get old. And so I am here. I was asked to come in and to preach at the intersection of Jesus and Harriet this morning. And as I dug into my work to prepare for our time together, one of the first elements that became apparent to me was how much Jesus and Harriet have in common. Both of them had such a rocky start to their ministry. Both of them unlikely in appearance, unlikely in lineage. Neither one of them aligned with what the world expected a leader to look like, a change agent to look like. Jesus, a foreigner who rejected fame and rejected the worldly crown that was offered to him at several points. And also Harriet, also ahead of her time. As I did a search, I went online and looked at Wikipedia just to explore and see what they had to say about our beloved Harriet. Wikipedia says that she was born in 1822. She was an American abolitionist, a social activist. After escaping slavery, she made more than 13 missions to rescue approximately 70 enslaved people, including her family and friends, using the network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known collectively as the Underground Railroad. There also was mention of her service during the American Civil War, where she served as an armed scout and a spy for the Union Army. And ultimately, in her later years, she lived to be 91, y'all. 91 years young. She was an activist in the movement for women's suffrage. And also, right below that Wikipedia entry were quite a few comments and articles where folks were arguing about the legitimacy of Harriet Tubman's work. Did she really liberate what some had said were thousands of slaves? Is that really what she did? She didn't do that. As if rescuing 1,000 or 70 or 50 or 25 or 10 or 2 or 1, even 1 would have been an easy feat back in times of slavery, or even today. Hardly. As if any of us could wrap our minds or our hearts or our shoelaces even around the idea of traveling toward horror not once, not twice, but 13 times. Even Harriet's desire to do so makes her a shero indeed. And her active attempt, whether successful or not, is a Herculean and a prophetic feat. You see, Harriet wasn't the typical person that we envision saving and freeing folks. Man was super before superwoman was allowed to be so. Super and woman. Harriet was the dream of many enslaved in flesh, maybe not as expected, but God is never what we expect. God is not explicitly man or explicitly white, not only in the clouds or solely available on scheduled Sundays. God is not Charleston Heston or scriptured drama. Biblically, God always calls the outsiders, the outcasts, the least of these in society to speak truth to the insiders, the front row seaters, and the privileged. You see, the prophets are always the vulnerable. Jesus and Harriet, both misfits, called to do a mighty work to liberate a people who don't truly know that they are in bondage. Harriet, her own people. Jesus, his own people. In this case, not only Lazarus, but also Mary and also Martha and ultimately also the Jews. We find that same designation, Jews, throughout the book of John. The designation for those who have been indoctrinated to believe the way things are is the way that they are. The church folk, you see. They believe that some folks just got it like that. Jews who were believers in God, but not necessarily in Jesus, and thus had no idea that meant that they truly weren't believers in God in the first place. Then they didn't realize that if they didn't believe that freedom was possible for everyone, that liberation was possible for everyone, then they couldn't believe in Jesus, and thus they couldn't believe in God. Clinging to tradition and ritual, they couldn't even make room for imagination, couldn't even dream of better. They didn't realize that they were also being bamboozled, our Jewish siblings, that they were also getting got. They too were comfortable in their bondage. Twice they tried to stone him in Judea. The first time in John 8 for speaking truth. The second time in John 10, they came with their stones and their pitchforks with their crosses to burn, prepared to kill him after he did what they knew he would do, speak the truth. In Judea, in Jerusalem, also known as the city of peace, both times in the city of peace, harm was intended. Both times in the city of peace, there were threats and plots to disappear, to snatch, to extinguish. And Jesus wants to go back again there. To a harmful and a horrific place, claiming to be the city of peace for some but not for all, to help somebody, to help some people, to help God's people. Harriet, also following Jesus, also escaped bondage and decided to go back to a horrific place, to a place where people brought stone-made guns for the season, a space that was peaceful for some, but not for all, a place that tried to break her in both mind and body, and also in spirit. That tried to kill her. She chose to go back as well to save somebody she loved, to save some bodies she loved, to save some people God loved. Can't you hear it? The disciples saying, "You have got to be kidding me, Jesus." Harriet's beloved family and friends saying, "Harriet, you have got to be kidding me." You see, it made sense that those closest to Jesus and Harriet tried to warn them, tried to save them, tried to protect them, keep them from danger. It made sense that they initially questioned their power and their ability to change the world as they knew it in order to be the world that they knew it could become. You see, neither Jesus nor Harriet seemed to look like or act like folks they were expected to be. Women were expected to be meek and mild and quiet, silent, if you will. They were property, followers of men. Jesus, a foreigner, expected to know his place, to follow the rules in society, to accept things as they were. Both Jesus and Harriet, both in the world but not of it, unwelcome and unbelieved, to be more than the world said that they were, both pushing against societal limitations. We are limited by society, y'all. Bessel van der Kolk is the author of a very famous book called The Body Keeps the Score. If you haven't read it, you should. In it, he discusses learned helplessness in the vision of this experiment with dogs in a cage. In his quote, he says, "Dogs who had earlier been subjected to inescapable shock, literal shock treatments, made no attempt to flee, even when the door was wide open. The mere opportunity to escape does not necessarily make traumatized animals or people take the road to freedom. Their fight and flight response has been thwarted, don't you see? Scared animals return home, regardless of whether home is safe or frightening. Likewise, society conditions us to stay in our bondage, unable to even imagine a life that could be better, even when we are presented with it with an open door. Fuller, in color, better for us all. Jesus knew that better was possible. Jesus knew that people couldn't imagine it even with words. Jesus knew that he needed to show them so they would believe. Because sometimes we are in bondage truly because we cannot see beyond our own current circumstance. Well, he's dead and that's that. Well, it's slavery and that's that. Hard times will never end. This is as it was. This will continue to be so. What are we fighting for? There is no reason. You see, it's hard to believe resurrection and freedom, that liberation can happen when folks have been walking dead for so long. Hungry for so long, low for so long. It's hard to believe that wins can happen for them when they have been told for so long that they are losing, that they are losers, that they are lost. Lost causes. After white supremacy and patriarchy tells us that we are nothing for so long, it is understandable that we come to underestimate ourselves and others and God, assuming that we're just not fill in the blank enough to do the thing that needs to be done, that we long for, that the world needs. We just can't imagine any other setting or circumstance where the math equation adds up to a different solution. In her book entitled God is a Black Woman, Dr. Christina Cleveland writes, "Imagination is theology. We can only believe what we can imagine, and our cultural landscape hasn't given us many tools to imagine a non-white, non-male God." Why does Christina Cleveland write that God is a Black woman? Because if God can be a Black woman, God can be for Black women. And if God can be for Black women, the most vulnerable, the most oppressed group, the least of these, the most least of these in society, then God can be for any of us. Then God can be for all of us. Then God can be for you. Jesus intentionally waited until the fourth day, when the Jewish tradition said that the soul was already gone and all was already lost. He waited until after the fact, after the hope was lost, after the curtains were closed and everyone was told, well, you ain't got to go home, but. Jesus waited until the world said the end to the story before he showed them the holy addendum, before he showed them the possibility, before he showed them the power of the promise of the holy impossible. You see, Jesus knew that they had to see to believe. Talk about grace. To know what you know and do what you do and say what you say right in front of folks' faces, and they still don't believe. And yet he still travels to Judea, still gives of himself, still empties himself, still over and over and over again. Likewise, Harriet knew that better was possible too. She knew that a place existed for the here and not yet prophets of this world, whose bodily existence spoke messages sent by God, even when their voices were silenced, whose presence in the societal outskirts spoke prophetic volumes of the gaps that God did not design and that God did not co-sign either. Harriet knew that she was more than the freedom papers that she carried, even the ones that weren't her own. She knew that white supremacy was going to hunt her down, pull her over, stop and search and frisk her, ask her for her license, her registration, her freedom papers, and even mispronounce her name all the while, even when she did nothing wrong. If I could count the number of times folks hear me teach and preach, see the letters before my name, read my bio, and still ask me for my freedom papers, you'd be surprised how often that happens. Both Harriet and Jesus told the people, the bamboozled Jews and the conditioned enslaved, the puppeteering leaders and the whip-holding masses, that what society said, what the man-made patriarchy, man-made church said, wasn't the last word, it was just their word. Both Harriet and Jesus, in their societal vulnerability and their God-breathed strength, punctured the fabric of the status quo and showed the world what was possible, that God is possible, that God can speak through and use the least of these, that an immigrant can be holy and a queer folk can too, that a person in poverty can be powerful and a black woman can too. And folks started to dream. Well, if Jesus can resurrect on the fourth day, what else is possible? They started to hope. If God can move through a woman, and a black one at that, who else might God use? And then they started to believe. Maybe God can use me too. Maybe God can use us too. Maybe God can love me too. Maybe God can love us too. To go back to Judea over and over and over again takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of strength, and a lot of faith. Only someone who knows that the reward is worth the cost would take such a risk, a sacrifice, to put their lives on the line repeatedly. Well, this is the epitome of solidarity. You see, solidarity means you have to lose something. To tell a people that they are beloved and worth more than the scraps off the table that they'd been given. To stand and to march and to kneel with them, to go back for them in the dark and the light, tells them that they are valuable. Do you know that belief is a gift to this world? To believe in something inside of you, beyond you, it does something to your mind, to your body, to your spirit, to your life. Believing is life. That's the key. The mind. Believing, choosing to believe. John writes in verse 45, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, had seen what Jesus did and believed in him. Which means that they didn't believe when they got there. When they walked there, when they stalked there, when they went through the performative motions, when they traveled to the tomb, the entire time they followed Mary and Martha, the entire time they followed Jesus to that place of worldly death, they didn't believe. Makes me wonder how many folks are sitting in these pews following after Jesus who also don't believe. Do you know what a person can do when they believe? when they believe that they are worth something, when they believe that they can be something, that they can change something. Do you know what mountains a person, a church, a community can move when they believe that they can? Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Now, I'm a word nerd, a lover of language. Unbind him and let him go. Jesus didn't just say that to Mary, didn't just say it to Martha, didn't just say it to the gawking haters and nosy neighbors who came for spectator sport and for show. Jesus said it to everyone. He said it to all of them because freeing the bound is everyone's responsibility. If we can, we should. Period. And we definitely can. Consider what Minnesota has done in these past several months. After being historically silent to the oppression of people of color, we finally arrived to believe that we could fight against the small-minded giant called empire. We came together, shared our hearts and our gifts, and combined our collective power. We stood and marched and organized, united against the horrific and condoned snatching of our immigrant siblings. We made history. And more importantly, we made a difference. And we should have. As one of my daughters has said to me on multiple occasions, why should we be rewarded for doing the right thing? As I said in 8 o'clock service, out of the mouth of babes, right? Likewise, Harriet wasn't eager for applause or for fame, and neither was Jesus. She didn't want fame, and he didn't want a king's worldly crown. See, Jesus already had a king's crown, and God already knew Harriet's name. Change happened because many Minnesotans finally believed in ourselves and in the truth that our neighbors deserve to be treated with respect and are entitled to due and fair process. Imagine what we can do if we continue to believe that every person is entitled to freedom, to liberation, and to life. As we were processing in, the very Reverend Jared was right behind me. He doesn't know this, so I'm not looking at him, so he doesn't see me looking at him. He was singing, "We Shall Overcome." One of my biggest pet peeves about that song is the someday. Someday. Wait it out. Be patient. Take the whip. Navigate the oppression. Someday it'll be different. Someday it'll be better. Can it not be Tuesday? Can we not overcome Tuesday? Very Reverend Jared was behind me saying, "We shall overcome today." And I thought, oh, we're going to be friends. Because that is exactly what Jesus came to tell us. Jesus came to tell us that we can do so much if we continue to believe that every person is entitled to freedom, to liberation, and to life. Jesus came to tell us that. Harriet came to tell us that. Thank God they came to tell us that. Amen.